Morning. So today I want to talk briefly about the word trans and the fact that for me that's a kind of an umbrella term which describes a whole spectrum of identities and of experiences. And I think we use it slightly indiscriminately these days, but I think it's important to understand some definitions and to perhaps explore a little bit the diversity that it may hide. Um, it's always been understood in some sort of way that firstly it's a taboo kind of topic, or even though trans people have been here and will always be here, and there's absolutely nothing particularly untoward. There's always been a term that's been sexualized to a certain extent, although it doesn't necessarily need to be. And also, it's always implied that being trans, there's an element of perversion, of there's an element of somehow promiscuity, although that's really not the case at all. So we'd just like to unpack some of the trans terms, if you like, that we may use, or we might just need to understand, and maybe just define very quickly the experiences which are attached to some of these terms. And it's important to say that whatever I address today, it's probably the most common, if you like, or the most habitually met, but actually there's an awful lot of other trans identities out there that we could easily unpack as well. But I think it's very important to start off by talking about the terms transsexual and transgender. Transsexual is a slightly demeaning, if you like, term which has been traditionally used to describe somebody whose identity does not match their sex at birth. But I think we understand that sex and gender are different things, and I think we use now the words the term transgender, which is basically, if you like, an evolution of the term transsexual, because it reflects and it validates the fact that gender is something that is constructed, and in fact it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we have construct or we identify with a gender that does not match our sex, if you like, at birth. So transgender is that, if you like, cover term for people who have this experience. Importantly, transvestism, so people who are transvestites, it's could be potentially transgender, but they don't have to be. It could be people who wear clothes which society has deemed that they belong to the opposite sex. If you think about it, a skirt doesn't have a gender, a pair of trousers doesn't have a gender, but society has genderized these particular items. So a transvestite will be an individual that wears clothing which society decided belong to the opposite sex. They may be transgender, they may not be, but that's kind of the spectrum of their experience. Now, drag queen, which again we've heard so many horror stories about drag queens reading stories to children, imagining humanity, of people in a dress, for example, reading stories to children. How terrible that is. So drag queens are, by definition, again, could be transvestites, could be transgender, but they don't have to be. Traditionally, drag queens come from a period of a history where women were not allowed to perform in the performing arts, and therefore men would habitually play those roles as well. And it signifies somebody who wears clothes of, again, that society deemed to be of the opposite sex, mainly for performance purposes, but also sometimes they are so over the top and such caricatures, if you like, in order to highlight the way society looks at gender. So it's not a grotesque parody of gender, if you like. It's actually trying to underline and to point out or even over the top in some cases, how society looks at gender and gender roles. So drag queens are very much entertainers, if you like, in that respect. Now, we then move on with people that can be understood as intersex. Now, these are individuals who do not to have both features or have sexual features which are not readily or easily identified as male or female. And this again, it's an absolute a part of the human condition, and there's nothing freakish or grotesque about it. It's just that a number of individuals have this feature about them. Now, this is slightly more physical, if you like. We also have androgyni, so androgynous people, who basically have both male and female features, but they're not necessarily sexual, or sorry, physical, but they could be sexual in some way or whatever. They basically, intersex people have sexual, oh, sorry, physical characteristics which are potentially identified with both sexes or neither, or they're not usual in that respect, whereas androgynous people have features of both sexes or of both genders, again, depending on which way they identify themselves in that respect. And again, perfectly natural experiences and perfectly natural way to be. It's very, very difficult if you look if you study nature, if you look in nature and if you look in biology, this idea of binary is not as clear cut as some people have you believe. There's males and there's females, there's nothing else. It really isn't that clear cut, and there's lots of examples from the natural world where androgynous or even intersex features appear in various animals, for example. Now we also talk about slightly more differently about two features, which one is called, let me see if I can pronounce this correctly, autogynephilia and autoandrophilia. Now what this means is that there's an individual who experiences sexual pleasure by imagining themselves having sexual organs of the opposite gender. So if I'm a man, I would have a sexual experience in imagining myself having female sex organs, for example, or if I was somebody who identifies as a or was born as a female, would fantasize about having a more male sexual organs, and all the other experiences I mentioned aren't necessarily sexual, whereas there is an element of sexual satisfaction with regards to this particular experience. And actually, if we think about it, there are various obviously sexual fantasies, and actually one of these more common fantasies is gender swapping, which autogynephilia is kind of part of, if you like. This is during sex, incidentally. These are a few features that are part of the spectrum. Then obviously there's genderqueer, there's non-binary, there's all sorts of other stuff we could talk about, and I might do it in a later video. But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that when we just say trans, there's actually a wealth of experience there. There's a wealth of variety, of diversity, and just saying trans might hide a lot of people's lived experience and everyday life, if you like. Now, there's 2 points which I think are worth mentioning. Firstly, that none of this is unnatural, and we can find plenty of cases in the real world and in the natural world, I should say. That's one thing. And secondly is the fact that there is nothing particularly immoral, unethical, anything about this. This is basically somebody's life, and they're just trying to live it the best they see fit. So, I think in conclusion, I think it's just important to understand the words that we use, and it's important to understand the context that we use, and it's important to understand the fact that life is a lot more complex than we think it is. So, have a good rest of the day.